Back, everybody. Hope you had some good lunch. We've had all our talks. The rest of the day really is a workshop about a really interesting new project. New project. I mean, it is a new project looking at adders in Scotland, but it's repeating something that happened before. And I think it's fantastic that it's now going to be discussed with a wide audience. And I'll just hand over to Angie and John, who I think are going to take us through the first part.
So we're going to talk about the adder survey that Nature Scot is promoting in the next couple of years. It was a project that we had a project in the early 90s, 93, 94, to look at the adder distribution. I think it's even older than that. I think it was first initiated during the Nature Conservancy Council for Scotland's brief one-year life between NCC and Scottish Natural Heritage. It's two parts, a questionnaire part and a field survey part. And I had a sneaky peek at Angie's slides. She's going to say everything. I don't think there's anything I need to say, so I won't.
Okay, thank you, John. Okay, I'm going to go back. I'm just going to say that the original study was coordinated by Chris Redding with colleagues, as mentioned, and it was commissioned by Scottish Natural Heritage, and that was published in 1994 as Scottish Natural Heritage Research Survey and Monitoring Report number 38. Now we have a copy of that electronically, which can be made available. I think quite a lot of people have seen it already, and certainly I think people are aware of it. So moving forward, so in 1994, this was a major part of a wider investigation initiated by Scottish Natural Heritage into the status and distribution of the adder in Scotland. So the Institute of Terrestrial Ecology, Biosphere Consultancies and the Scottish Agricultural Service were contracted by SNH to carry out this work. And as we'll see, it's quite a complicated study, and it drew on many aspects, which is why Scottish Agricultural Service were involved. So Nature Scot now wished to repeat the study, and we've got funding for the period from 2022 to 24. So that would be 2 seasons, the 2022 spring, summer, and 2023 spring and summer. The work is going to be on a partnership basis. I'm very keen, everyone's very keen, it's a partnership. So although it will be led by Amphibian and Reptile Groups of the UK and Amphibian and Reptile Conservation, the intention is that all of you, and that includes NGOs, individuals, groups, whoever, are invited to become involved, and indeed have to become involved because we won't be able to do it otherwise. So it's essentially a very big partnership, but coordinated by ARG UK and ARC. And within that, I should say that Amphibian and Reptile Groups of UK are coordinating the survey part, and ARC are coordinating the questionnaires. So moving on, the 1994 report, essentially it was a literature review, and just sort of summation of where we were at that time, looking at the past distribution of the adder in Scotland, and to try and put the Scottish adder population into a wider European context. And I can certainly say, in a national context, it's extremely important. Your adders are doing better than our adders, essentially, in England. And I think it's important that, you know, we bear that in mind. So, as I said, there's 2 aspects to this. And the first aspect was the questionnaire surveys, which were conducted in 1992 and 1993. And they were essentially asking people what they thought the present status and distribution of the adder was in Scotland. And incredibly, the questionnaires covered a total of 94% of the Scottish mainland, and that included the Inner Isles, but not the Outer Isles. So the questionnaire was split into two parts, the 1992-93 questionnaire. The first part was a farm survey, and this targeted individual farms and asked the farmers what reptiles they thought they had on their land. Now, the systematic part was that using an Ordnance Survey Land Ranger maps, the 1 to 50,000 series, 2 farms were selected more or less in the middle of a 10 by 10 kilometre square in mainland Scotland and the Inner Isles. And in that way, they hoped to have a good coverage. So I would say that 1,002 farms were selected for follow-up based on initial contacts, and that's where Scottish Agriculture were involved. And from that, 1,952 surveys were sent out over the 2 years of the project. The second survey is what they called an ITE survey, and this specifically targeted groups of people with an interest other than farmers. Now, I haven't made a list of all the different groups that were contacted, but 2,115 questionnaires were sent to 1,439 addresses, and these included individuals, NGOs, and statutory bodies from right across Scotland. So of those 2,115 questionnaires that were sent out, 723 usable returns. Now, I'm not quite sure what usable means. I suspect some of them were unclear or not usable in some other way. But they provided a total of 2,708 pieces of information on adders, slow worms, and common lizards in Scotland. So just to clarify, this is the farm survey. I haven't showed the ITE survey, but it was similar. So essentially, it was a fairly straightforward paper survey. Remember, this is in the 90s. I think they've just done incredibly well, actually, to get that coverage. So what they've essentially done is provided a pictorial representation of adder, slow worm, and common lizard. And then they've just said, have you got it? Haven't you got it? Do you not know? And then some additional information was requested about the habitat, when they were seen, just to fill in some background on that. They also asked whether there had been major land use changes on the farm in the last 10 years. And that was kind of used to inform whether agricultural practice was affecting reptiles. And then they've sort of asked for additional information. Again, it's quite hard. Where do you start? Do you have, are there other people who might be able to help you there? And further comments. So that was the fairly simple form that was sent out. The results of the questionnaires. Now, this is a summary, and I've taken all of this information directly from the report, more or less slightly paraphrased. So there was a strong evidence of a perceived decline in adder abundance during the 10 preceding years. So this is a 1992 survey, so we're talking about the 1980s, essentially. There was less strong evidence that the overall distribution of adders has changed, but the farm survey results specifically suggested that the distribution in farmed areas had contracted. Both surveys also indicated over the preceding 10 years, so this is the 1980s again, there were significant changes in land use. Now, this is primarily attributed to afforestation, which I'm presuming means plantation, coniferous plantation, and changes in agricultural practice on farms. And the two key things that were highlighted in Chris Redding's report were change in set-aside and increased cereal production. So that's where we stand with this. 30 years on, Amphibian and Reptile Conservation will be taking this forward. The intention is to repeat these questionnaires to have a picture of how things have changed in the intervening period. I'm just going to quickly check in with John. Do you want to say anything else about the questionnaires? You have to unmute, John. Oh.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any much else to say. I mean, this time round it'll be an online questionnaire, and we'll instead of looking at everybody's address in the yellow pages, we'll be sending stuff out via the Scottish National Farmers Union and the Scottish landowners, rather than specific people. So hopefully it'll work out and we'll have something comparable with the last survey.
Fantastic.
It's early days yet, so it's
absolutely. I mean, this is a big task. I don't want to underestimate what a big task this is, and as I say, how well Chris's group did 30 years ago. So we shall see whether modern technology makes it easier or harder. Okay, right. So the other output of the questionnaires was a habitat suitability model, which was developed by the project relating reptile distribution to the ITE land class survey. And this is an overview, essentially showed that intensively arable regions and rugged mountainous areas, and they specified either side of the Great Glen, were least suitable for adders. I think we probably know that. Adders are strongly associated with heterogeneous land. What they also found was that habitat was more suitable for the common lizard across much of Scotland. So I think they were more widely reported. For common lizard, they found that they prefer varied lowland areas and steep mountain slopes in highland regions, but again, generally absent from arable and mixed farmland. And then the poor old slowworm, with the exception of the Western Highlands, Scotland is generally unsuitable for slowworms. That was the comment that was made. Now, there's no mention of grass snake, but people weren't asked about grass snake. And I know, Chris, I've read about this, that there's a great confusion where adders are sometimes called grass snakes, and there's got a confused etymology in Scotland. So I think we can say people weren't asked about grass snakes and may not have been aware that they could have been looking for them. But maybe that's something we can include this time, John. Okay, so now I've taken this data, Chris McKinnell has provided this. So this is a replotting that he's done for his book, and I've put the reference there, and it is available. You can, sorry, download it from GNHCS. So what this slide shows is the redding data, I'm going to call it, is the pink and the yellow. And so the pink is presence of adders based on the questionnaires, and the yellow is absence of adders based on the questionnaires. And then that has been overlaid with additional survey data from 5 kilometres squared, which has been gathered since 2000. And I'm just going to show that. So this is just the data from 2000. So this is not in the Reading report, but it's something obviously Chris and Pete have spent a lot of time over. And these are all the records that they were able to obtain from NARS, NBN and other sources. And that shows a pattern, if you like, that does agree with what Chris Reading was showing of where adders are found in the mainland Scotland and the Inner Isles. I'll just let you all digest that for a minute. And as I say, references the Amphibians and Reptiles of Scotland by Chris McInerney and Pete Minting, which you can download. So moving that on. So from the field survey, which is what I really want to focus on today, because this is the bit that ARG UK are leading on. So in 1993, 16 volunteer surveyors monitored 16 sites across Scotland to obtain baseline information for monitoring changes in adder status. Now, originally, the initial pilot was of 12 sites based on random squares, but there weren't any adders found. So they went back to the questionnaires and selected 16 new sites that were perceived to be good for reptiles and also giving a good distribution across the mainland and inner islands. The mean search time for the surveyors who went out was about 60 minutes per site, and all reptiles were recorded in the survey. And each site was visited from between 2 and 12 times, a total of 97 visits. Now, I think the variation there, as in fact, I'm very pleased that Jeanette gave her talk earlier, does remind us all that actually reptile surveying, particularly in the Highlands, is a little bit dicey. You know, it can be sunny when you set out, it can be a howling gale when you arrive. So it's entirely possible that there were difficulties with site access, with weather, and actually just finding the reptiles. So that was the 1994 survey. And this is the field monitoring sheet that the 16 volunteers or pairs of volunteers took out with them. Just fairly simple. Essentially, just information was asked about location, recorder, grid reference and date. They recorded their start and finish time, weather conditions. I think a comment was made that there was a crossover between sunny and hot or something. I think there was some confusion, I think, with the terms there, but those essentially were the weather conditions. And then very simply, people were just asked, did they see adders, slow worm, lizard, adult, juvenile, male, female? So that was the data that was collected, plus a few comments. And these are the results. So interesting. Adders were recorded at 9 sites. Adders are in red and were observed on 23 out of 54 visits, which was 44% of visits. Now, what we can immediately see is that a very large number of adders, 48 adders in fact, were observed at site number 15, whereas low numbers were found at the other sites. And this is also the total number of visits. So we've got to remember that sites were visited different numbers of times, and so those totals are across either 2 to 12 visits. Now, I've not plotted all this. I've just tried to keep it really, really simple for the PowerPoint, but it does give a pattern. What we also have information on common lizard and slow worm, and we can see that common lizard were recorded at 5 sites, observed on 10 out of 30 visits, which was about a third, and slow worm were recorded on 3 out of the 16 sites and observed on 4 out of 14 visits, which is again just under a third. So that is the data that was collected in 1994 that we wish to repeat. What we're asking you to do is we will try and resurvey the 16 sites, so we need to track them down. There may be issues with that because obviously in the intervening 30 years, land use may have changed. And it may be that a site that was open heathland has now been planted up for forestry and vice versa. It might even have been built on, we don't know. So the first part of this survey is going to be actually to get to the sites and assess them. We may identify additional sites that are thought to be of special importance or fill in the gaps. And that again is something we would be grateful for thoughts on that. Obviously there's the logistics of it, but it may be that there are obvious sites that have been overlooked. We will organise land management permissions with NatureScot. So that's not something for volunteers to be concerned about. And we want to match small teams of volunteer surveyors with each site. So if you think that you can help, and I'm very much hoping that you can help, we're going to move to poll 1 in a minute, and I'm going to ask you to vote. Ideally, the team of surveyors will visit each site on 6 to 8 occasions in each season, but we can appreciate that some sites will present more of a logistic challenge, and the weather in Scotland can be unpredictable, as Jeanette has highlighted already. So just let us know what you can do. If you think you can go once, that's still great. You know, any help, any support is absolutely gratefully received here. Can you indicate what you think you'll be able to undertake in 2022 and 2023 at a seasons? And we've said April to August. I know at some places they can be seen in February, possibly beyond August, but that's the sort of core time that we're looking at. And we do have a small travel budget, so please do not allow that to put you off. If you want to be involved, we can help you to get there. And these are the sites. So Chris Cathrine kindly plotted the sites, hence from Caledonian Conservation. It's under their license, so it's very important that if this map is reproduced, that it's always reproduced exactly as it is. So these are the sites. Now what I'm going to try and do now, which is the clever bit, is open poll 1, and I'm going to ask John Wilkinson to talk us through it.
Yeah, the poll's up, and if anyone can't now see the map, you can drag the poll to the right of your screen, and which will enable you to see the map fine. And the sites, the names of the sites are listed in order and relate to the numbers on the map. And if anybody's interested, just tick the boxes where you think you can help to survey adders on those sites. If you are determined to go and survey sites in the Highlands, which would be brilliant, we can help you out with travel money, and we're getting some notifications in the chat which we need to pay attention to, I think.
And if you don't want to commit now, of course, you are welcome to email later if you thought about it, or if you can think of someone you can nominate, perhaps want to ask first.
Well, could I just say something? I noticed that 1A and 1B have been lumped together. I think that's because the original report gave them both the same site name. However, they are about 50 kilometers apart, so quite different sites. It is the thing though, Dumfries and Galloway is the best place for herps in Scotland.
It is.
There's not such involvement with people. I guess populations are very dispersed, aren't they? And public transport is poor.
That's right. There are a couple of sites in the borders there. I mean, number 15, which was the best site, is near Bonster Bridge. So that's.
I think I was just thinking in general about Dumfries and Galloway. It's just a great place for herps.
It is.
There's also just a question, sorry, from Stephen, just saying that there's no sites near where he lives. Is there any scope for other sites?
These are the sites that were done the first time, and I think it's critical that they are repeated. Probably, if this is going to be compared with the other survey, which I think is why we're focusing on these today. But I think there is an idea that perhaps some other sites may be added to fill in some of the geographical holes.
Suggest that for those Galloway sites, that it might be useful to try and contact people either at the RSPB reserves on the Solway or Wildlife and Wetland Trust, because they've got a lot of people who are interested in birds and amphibians and reptiles. So they might be the kind of people that would be susceptible to being persuaded.
Yes, I imagine there's going to be a little bit more legwork than just showing this at a conference. I think there's going to be a lot of legwork, but obviously it's good to get some initial enthusiasm. And that's a really good suggestion, Roger.
Can I just ask, because panelists can't vote, but I know there's a few of us in this Inverness area who are interested in taking part in this, so to register our interest, really. I think David has already made a comment, and I've made a comment as well.
Okay, well, we can, if Jim can see the chat, he can perhaps add that in as well. So can you see the results now?
People should be able to see the results now.
Okay.
Some clear winners in there.
Thanks, Angie.
Yeah, Flanders Moss and Lammermuir Hill seem to be very popular. Right. So the second poll is, please evaluate your personal experience or expertise concerning reptile surveying in Scotland. This will help us to assess how much support the project will require. So this isn't a judgment, I should say. It's just literally one of the things we've talked about is how we can support the surveyors, and whether you can have an online Zoom, you can have training, or whether you'd like mentoring, in which case we will send out one of our dedicated trainers with you to kind of get you going on it and walk over the site and see how you are. So I'm now going to have a go at poll 2.
On this one, yeah, and as Angie says, we're not interested in judging anybody. It's just a measure of how much help people would feel that they would prefer to have to participate in this survey. So if you're not confident, it's absolutely fine, and we'll try and provide more help for those people.
Everybody participated that wants to. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So that's interesting, a real spread, except nobody's very confident. Okay, so now we're on to poll 3, which is, what are your training and support needs? So as already alluded to, this is only the beginning of this whole process. So The idea is that we will reach out through social media, by email, by friends of friends, or anybody, really anybody. And then we were going to offer an online training session in January when we're going to finalise the project details. So we'll be able to work out who's going to which site, what exactly you're going to be asked to do, and get a little bit of feedback about how many times you think you can go, etc., etc. So that will be in January. Everything will be finalised online. And then B, we can offer face-to-face reptile survey training in the field. And I'm saying at my most local site, because we obviously don't want to run too many sessions. And the idea is we will mobilise a local person who considers themselves to be very confident or expert to go with you, and see, I would like additional support with financial, health and safety information and advice. Right, I'm going to run the poll and John is going to take over. There we go.
Great, yeah, that's up, Angie.
Right.
So yeah, again, as Angie said, this is to help us with planning, really. We will be offering the training in January, whatever, and anybody can attend that. It'll be open to everybody who's expressed an interest. Other people might want a little bit more in-depth training. And of course, especially if you're going to a site that's remote, or at least a long way away from you, financial support may be possible. Certainly health and safety stuff will be provided where we need to do that. So tick all boxes if you feel the need. A comment from David O'Brien et al. There. Thanks very much for that, which is that he's happy to take people out surveying in the Highlands, which sounds like a grand opportunity to me, to be perfectly honest. Sign up now. It's a long way for me to come, but other people will.
So I'm going to end this poll and share the results. Ta-da! Any words of wisdom, John?
Oh, that's great. I mean, we've got most of the people filling in the poll wanted to go to the online training and would prefer additional training. Not everybody needs additional support, so that's great, but we will look into what we can offer, especially in bespoke circumstances. So that's pretty clear. It's pretty clear that some basic training would be of benefit across the board, I think.
It was interesting. We were looking at your comment that the habitat suitability index for slow worms said the West Highlands was pretty much the only place, but
yeah, we disagree with that completely, and so does the NBN.
Well, yeah,
I also totally disagree with that.
Yeah,
it's a really dubious finding, but I think it's probably partly because of the way that the original surveys were done. So they didn't put refuges out, so immediately, your chance of detecting slow worms is massively reduced.
Yeah,
and then
we're
also some of the methods
the lack of reptile records in the Monolea, and I think Rob's already been in touch with SLE and possibly NFUS, but I think there could be benefits from working with land managers in the Monolea, because I don't believe it's so short of reptiles.
particularly given the recent wind farm construction, because one of the things, whenever people construct a wind farm, they do surveys.
But they don't necessarily submit the records.
So it might be worth talking to some of the wind farm developers and say, hey, you got any records, lads and lasses?
I mean, quite often they only record the things that they're specifically out looking for, which tends to be birds quite a lot of the time. But they don't necessarily, because they're associated with
do reptiles.
Yeah, okay, but because they're associated with a commercial development, then the records don't necessarily go to anyone else. So that would be another thing to work with people on.
Just going to say, in my experience of people who do monitoring and surveys on wind farms, most of the people who do the field work do record everything, really. And I get photos of adders and things from people I know who do that stuff. It's just that they often don't, and they often end up, it depends on who's doing the report. They don't always end up in the report.
Right, okay, so they're recording them themselves, but they're not necessarily going anywhere.
No, they would go, if they would end up in the report if it was my company doing it, but not everyone does the same things. Some focus on the target species only, but I always include incidentals, but not everyone does.
And they still
and-
wouldn't necessarily end up on the MBN anyway if the record.
Oh, very, very unlikely. Very unlikely that
So
they'll
that
end up
might
in
be
the
somewhere
MBN.
to get in touch with the actual wind farms themselves.
Yeah, and also game estates record game bags, and their data usually goes back quite a long way. And
Yeah.
most estates record adders in their game bag info.
Okay. I mean, I have talked to gamekeepers and stalkers, etc., who will report seeing adders, and are often quite pleased to see adders just because, you know, they like them.
Yeah.
But I don't think they ever record them anywhere necessarily.
I found that having worked on quite a lot of estates in this line of work, most of the estates I've worked on, the estate managers have been able to provide data from their game books or the game books
Okay,
with bag data.
So they have it themselves.
Yeah, it's handwritten usually. It's not
Yeah.
usually digitized,
Yeah.
but most of them do record adders.
Okay.
I ask a question about how are we going to publicize this whole thing more widely to try and attract more people?
I believe so.
Yeah, because I think that'd be really good. I think you might get a lot more people if we obviously publicize the sites,
I think,
and then provide some training for those people to do that.
I personally think we should try to publicize it as widely as possible to maximize the likelihood of having local volunteers do the surveys.
Yeah.
And Angela's going to be also doing some additional sort of, shorter sessions just for anybody interested in coming along who couldn't make it today. And also this is going to be available, but there's going to be information on social media. She was, I think she had mentioned earlier to us, so she might be talking about that later. So so I think there will be quite a call out, and I'm sure it'll be going through all the ARG newsletters as well, and certainly.
Is there going to be a dedicated web space to mention the project and the forums and the sites and such likes?
Yeah, we'll set up a web page for it. That's a really good idea, actually.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's quite a lot to do. This was, as I say, the beginning in the sense that we are now launching the study, but and I really want everyone to feel engaged and empowered. So that's why I didn't want to do it all and then launch it at you as if it's a done deal. So all the comments and ideas and comments and suggestions I'm going to take away, and then I'm going to, as you say, I can make a web page, I can make a place for us to put our forms and our thoughts and take it from there. But it is, as I say, everyone is welcome, everybody needs to be on board. So just how we manage that.
Picking up a point I think people were discussing earlier, I think Jim, you mentioned it about putting down some tins or whatever on some of the sites to try and capture slow worms and other reptiles. Do we want to consider doing that on these sites?
It was something we talked about, and it was something.
Oh, sorry, do I have the camera on? No, the video's not on.
You've not muted it.
We were willing, ARG UK was willing to put some funds in for Refugia actually as part of our 100% funds. So yes, is the answer, yes. If people think they can get the Refugia to the site, and again, I'm not suggesting anybody's carrying 40 enormous tins on their back across some sort of mountain, but you know, if you think you can get them, we will happily provide Refugia for you, yes.
Okay, I think that's quite good to do, I think. It might help pick up some of the more species. So, and certainly I think I could probably speak to some of the estates locally. That there's 3 sites in the national park, and we could probably get their estates involved in that, and they could help put out Refugia on those sites for us.
I'm just spotting that Chris McKinnell's got his hand up.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for organising this. I think it's a fantastic project that you're all organising. Just a couple of thoughts. If I could follow up on the point about the refuge mats, please, of course, we've got to consider comparability of this survey compared with what was done before. But I think Jim and other people have commented, it makes a huge difference, at least for finding slow worms, if you can use these mats. And they don't always need to be tins. In my experience, you can just use simple roof felting, which is much lighter and easier to use. And I think in the context of this survey, they could be really effective, because I found put them out and I can get slow worms underneath them even within a week. So they do work very quickly. And I've got lots of sites where I never see slow worms unless I put mats down. So I think the mats could be quite an important help for people to find at least slow worms. If I could just another point, and you forgive me here, but I noticed you've got the period of dates for the survey. And again, I appreciate you might want to do comparable sort of months of the year with what was done in the past. But at least for adders, can I urge that we do consider getting people out in March, because in my experience, March is the golden period for finding adders in Scotland.
I would also probably add to that, we should be quite conscious, and if we have a really mild spell, they're out in February in the hills and the Kendall.
Oh yeah, absolutely. February the 18th. So mid-February is where my ones appear, almost to the date. But even in poor weather, John, please, at that time of the year, once they come out, if there's a bit of sun out, and even if it's mixed day with rain and stuff, it's a brilliant time to do surveying, because the air temperature is quite cold, and it means the snakes will bask all day from dawn till dusk. So of course that's really great if you're going to new places, because then you've got all day to find them. When it gets warmer later in the year, in my experience, they just bask for an hour or two in the morning and then they disappear. So you've just got a short window later in the year to find them, sort of in the morning, usually between sort of 8 and 10 o'clock. But certainly during that period of March, well, in my experience, from mid-February right through March, and then actually about first to second week in April, they're the best times. By the time you get to mid-April, the adders pair up and you get mating, and then they all disappear. And of course, at that point, also the vegetation gets much thicker. And actually through the middle of the year, it's very difficult to find adders. And I think if we get people surveying in new sites, then they will not find them for those reasons. So, you know, and actually it gets a little bit better later in the year. So September and October, actually today would be quite a good day for finding adders. It's quite sunny down here in Glasgow. So I think, you know, if we could consider, at least in, you know, for the Scottish theme, to consider getting people out in March, I think that would be a big plus for giving people chances of finding snakes.
I think as well, like looking at the weather and not limiting ourselves to starting late would be great. With regards to refugia, I think I've probably got several hundred, and if I'm not needing them for anything, I don't mind people borrowing them. They're roofing felt.
Roofing felt's really good. And
yeah, I love it. It's cheap.
And it's very light. You can roll it up and put it in a backpack, and you can carry it in. And you know, tins are much more long term. Don't get me wrong. I think longer term they're better, but at least for slow worms, you know, a patch of roofing felt. I don't know what size you have, Chris, but mine are usually about 2 feet square, sort of thing, something like that. And you can have quite a few of them and roll them out and put them out. And they're a game changer for finding slow worms on a site. You know, slow worms really like them.
Yeah, I could probably provide some as well for a couple of sites. I've got some kicking about, some felt and some corrugated iron for if the sites are accessible. I think the unit sites are a good example of that.
Well, that's just the one issue with the corrugated. I think corrugated is better, Stephen, and please, it really is longer term, but of course it's very heavy and it's inconvenient. Yes. The beauty of as you know, with mats, you can just roll them up and even put them in your rucksack. You know, don't get me wrong, they're reasonably heavy, but they're much more convenient for people going out to new sites where they don't know. And I think if you decided to use them, we could also give a little bit of instruction about the sort of best places to lay them down at sites. You know, usually on slopes, southwest facing. You get a little bit canny about the best places to put them, which have most success. And they're a huge plus for finding slow worms, as I say.
Great. I actually use felts that are basically half the size of yours, Chris. Just because I often put hundreds out in places I've got to hike out to, and when you make them that size, you can fill rucksacks with them really effectively, and they seem to work fine. I think Chris Caledonian uses the same size as well and finds them to be very effective.
Okay, so even better. If you see what Chris is suggesting, all these people going out to new sites, and roof felding is quite cheap, and it really works. In my experience, and I know some people disagree, but I find adders use them far less. I have occasionally adders use them. I know down in England, people using tins and felts, they have more success with adders using refugias, but certainly in Scotland, they're fantastic for slow worms. And
Thanks, Chris. That's really useful, really helpful stuff. And I'm sure you'll have lots more to add as the project develops and things. So that is us at 3. I was wondering if, I think Jim was going to feed back to us about some stuff. So should I pass over to Jim?
Great. So everybody, thank you very much for voting. These were the 17 sites that we were interested to see if you were able to survey. And here are the results. Now, I've just plotted the results of the poll, and I realized that not everyone could fill in the poll, and some people added some other comments in the chat, so we can go over those as well. But basically, what I've done is against each survey site where at least one person said they would be interested to survey, I've put a green box with the number of votes. Where there were no people who volunteered, I've got an orange box. And where there was some question mark because of some chat I picked up, I've put yellow. So just to go over that, generally speaking, it looks like we've got pretty good coverage, unsurprisingly, for those sites just around the central belt. I can see Flanders Moss is very popular. And the site, that's Lammermuir Hills, isn't it? Just southeast of Edinburgh. So that's not surprising. That's great that we've got that covered. A bit further south, though, we've got a bit of work to do there. It looks like, site 14. I know that Moffat. There's shed loads of. The last time I looked, there were lots of adders there. So we've got to get people having a look at that one. And the one in the borders as well, number 15, that was the one, just to remind you, that was the one that seemed to have the highest count of adders in the 1994 survey. Obviously, it'd be nice to get to that one, and all of them really, but obviously today we've just got a first stab at trying to have people volunteer, and there's going to be plenty of other chances for people to come forward, and we'll be doing some more publicity about the project, so we'll get other people joining in, I'm sure. Looking further north, it's really good that we've got the Cairngorm sites covered, or at least one person at each of those so far. That's great. And moving further north still, I think in the chat there was mention, was it Janet, you were talking about possibly covering the Skye sites, or one of the Skye sites?
Yes, absolutely.
Which would be fantastic. So that orange box for 0 I've put on the Skye sites probably can change. Sorry, I only picked up half of the conversation there, so I wasn't quite sure. So that's really good. And then I saw there was some chatter about the sites around Inverness as well, obviously with Jeanette and David being based there. Hopefully we'll be able to pick up those 2 sites, 3 and 5, which are where are they? Dornoch, and I can't remember what the other one is now. Anyway, not too far from Inverness, so hopefully they should be doable. Then we've got the sites further north in Sutherland and Caithness, and again, I would hope that maybe some of our colleagues further north might be able to help out, or might know people who are a bit closer there who could cover those too. But we've got plenty of time to work on this, to recruit more. And obviously I haven't seen the results of the form that Rachael kindly posted the link to, and it may be that people are there, other folks. So I think, as a first go at trying to see, get an idea of how we might be able to cover all of these sites that were surveyed nearly 30 years ago, I'm actually really encouraged, and thanks everybody for your thoughts on that. And yeah, do spread the word. And I think Angie is probably the central contact to get in touch with, so she can keep a log of all of this, if that's fair enough. I don't know if Angie or John, you wanted to kind of add or change anything I've said there. I'll stop sharing.
No, I'm fine. I'm going to go away and work take all the chat and all the votes and all the polling and all the forms and bring something together. Then I'm going to email everybody that I know and ask people to forward the email. And I can also do something on social media. But yeah, I think with our fantastic network of groups as well, and we've got Frog Life, we've got other NGOs involved. I think between us, we can do this really, really well. And lessen the burden, so somebody doesn't have to go out 8 times for 2 years running if they're having to drive 3 hours each way to get there. So I think that's the other important thing. And one of the things I've learned, I've been involved with ARG UK for 11 years now, and it's not overfacing oneself. I think it's easy to agree to something, but sometimes, you know, the reality is you've got family and work and other pressures. So it's just what you can do and what you can do well without overfacing yourself. That's
and
great.
I think we'd also, I'm not sure if this was covered in any of the earlier discussions, but obviously we'll be providing advice on health and safety and all the logistical issues, but we probably expect people to visit at least in pairs rather than as singletons, I guess. Yeah, these are details we've got to work out, but in terms of safety.
Well, we've got our risk assessments, so we can go through that. I think it's a first go. It's just telling people about the project, making everybody aware, and then, you know, getting the sites covered. And then I think, as I said, once we get to January, we can really start to drill down. And it may be the surveyors can start going out in February if they think that's appropriate. Then, you know, why not? Let's go for it. I think it's like everything. We've got to go for this now. We've committed, so we're going for it now. So that's going to be it.
Also add that Jeanette said that also Rob is also teaming up with Danny, David and Jeanette, and they are also keen to do 2 as well as 3 and 5. So that's another one done.
I think it was just 1A and 1B that was perhaps a little bit too remote. I don't know.
Thanks for that, Rachel. So it looks like we're pretty close to covering all of them. There's just, interestingly, the border sites, and there was one, I think there's I've lost the map now, but there's one in sort of far western Dumfries and Galloway as well that needs looking at, or was it Ayrshire? Can't remember now. Anyway, I think we're doing pretty well. I'm really pleased.
Saying that, if there's difficulty covering 1A and 1B, I do a lot of work up there, and I could maybe combine that with working in the area. It's certainly a beautiful part of the world. Anyway, thank you for that. I think this project is going to be super, and it's great that it's all being talked about, and we'll get more ideas and more people getting on board. Super duper. So we just have one final talk for the day, which is from Rachael at Amphibian and Reptile Conservation about their new project in Scotland. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about this. On you go, Rachael.
Yeah, thanks everybody it's been a really great day and first ARG workshop that I've attended, and it was just nice to see, you know, talks from Lothian, well, the video from Lothian ARC, Lucy and Sheila talking about the power of engagement, Roger highlighting the importance of climate change and threats to amphibians, Chris and Stephen then talking obviously about the invasive species, and David and Jeanette and Cameron, the power student, you know, talking about the sort of the research that's been done, and David from ARG also, you know, the power of kind of restoration and mitigation. And I think it's, you know, it's really clear, obviously, with the climate and biodiversity crisis we have, that there's a lot of things to do, and it's just great to see so much work already being done in Scotland, and obviously we have lots more to do. So kicking off obviously with the ADA survey and other projects that have been going on. So we're really excited about the Saving Amphibians and Saving Scotland's Amphibians and Reptiles project. And so this project is a new project, but carrying on from some of the work that Pete Minting had done previously. And first of all, it's started with Jeanette, who is our education officer. So I don't know if you want to say a quick hello, Jeanette.
Hi, is everyone, if you can see me. I'm Janet, and I'm looking forward to working with everybody, and as Rachel said, getting started and following on from Pete's superb work in Scotland.
And then I'm the project officer working on the role. So Janet started just last month and I've started this month. And I'm mostly going to be focusing on citizen science, but also along with Janet, looking at partnership working as well, and landowner engagement. But what we're really excited about is to try and actually get some surveys, amphibian and reptile surveys done, so we can actually look at population trends. So following on from some of the great work that the NARS has done, but extending that to other areas in Scotland. And also, I suppose ARC is most been known for doing work on natjac toads and adders in Scotland. And just to give a little plug to the natjac toad project, which is run by the Amphibian Conservation Officer. So Yvette is really keen to get more volunteers in the Borders and Dumfries and Galloway. So that might be quite nice opportunities. I'm sure she has some fantastic volunteers that might also be keen to take part in the adder survey too. And it was just to kind of, yeah, here's our details, and we'll pop those into chat if you want to get in touch with us for anything. But it's also great to see, I mean, ARC have such a fantastic network across Scotland. And so it's just great to be involved in finding out a bit more. I'm definitely going to be signing up to joining a few of my local ARGs as well. So that's all from us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. That's really exciting. And thanks for covering so well everything that has been spoken about today. That leaves me little to do. So we're really at the end of the conference now, which is great because we're actually ahead of time, which is amazing. Unless anyone has anything they want to say or ask questions of beforehand, we do have a wee bit of time. No? Okay. Then I've certainly enjoyed this conference. I think the range of speakers has been superb. And I'm really impressed that so many of the Scottish ARGs, I mean, I think a lot of them really, I mean, there's certainly someone here from each one, and most of them have spoken, or there was the video from Lothian ARG. I think that's really great. And I've even learned what's going on around the place. I was really interested to hear about Fife ARG in particular. It's quite something to hear about a project I was involved in 11 years ago and what site's like now. I mean, that's really cool. I'm going to have to try and get out there and see it. I thought that as well, the opening talks were wonderful counterparts to one another, with the sort of broad stroke of citizen science and how you can engage with people and get wide data, and then how academic studies can focus in but are not necessarily able to give you wider trends in isolation. And always a pleasure to hear David speak. And I found I didn't know anything about toads on those islands, so that was certainly new, and they look like a beautiful place. I'll need to visit. And then I said some stuff about some stuff, and yeah, Tayside ARG are always really proactive in terms of projects and things, and it's fantastic that there's another another one getting off the ground. What else did we hear about? Frog life. I mean, again, I said it at the time, but I'm always bowled over with how much frog life managed to achieve. The number of ponds created, the number of people engaged, it's really incredible. Adders on wind farms, that's a really interesting talk. Jeanette's also a great speaker, and it sounds like there might be more scope to do things to make wind farms a bit more suitable, or an opportunity for adders. Always interesting to hear about ecology. It's really narrowing things down. Stephen Corcoran talking about overwintering, and I think there's probably some stuff to be done there, maybe a note and some collaboration, because I suspect that lots of people have got anecdotal evidence themselves of this. And I guess the starting point is to write maybe a brief note for the Hurt Bulletin or something like that with an NatureScot. And then the adder survey, I think it's really amazing to be going back and repeating something from the 90s. And I personally can't wait to find out the results, but also I'm very keen to be involved, and maybe I'll get the opportunity to go out and survey with some of you guys along the way. And on that note, I think I'm going to close the conference, if that's what one does. I've never done this before, so we're done.
Thank you to Chris. I'm going to say thank you to Chris, because really you've stuck with us all day, and it's been a long day, and you've held it together really well. You've held us to time. You've been just brilliant. So thank you.
Well, I think it's
thanks
really,
to all our speakers.
I think it's really down to you, Angie. You organised it. You put the framework together. All I've done is like said, right, now Rachel talk.
We've done it together. And also massive thank you to all the speakers and to all the delegates who came. It's been really fantastic. And Roger.
Yeah, just one thing to maybe finish off with. We've had these sort of conferences about what's happening to and about herps in Scotland on occasion before. The last big one was the jointly organised one, the University of Glasgow, and we had thought we'd do another one maybe this spring, and then COVID got in the way. But I think it might be worthwhile the groups who put this one together thinking about when would be a good time for another one, maybe 2 years' time. Because there clearly will be lots of results from things that are happening now and will be happening in the near future that will be worth reporting on.
That's a brilliant idea. We talked about doing one in Edinburgh actually, but obviously with COVID, it stalled and stalled. And in the end, I took the plunge and said, let's just do it online rather than keep waiting, because there's obviously so much going on. And so, you know, we have to, you know, be united as a network as well, because I think that's how information is shared and people realize they're not alone, particularly in such a big country. I think it's really important. But yes, if anyone is offering to organise a conference in Edinburgh or Stirling or Aberdeen or Dundee, I think that would be great.
I think I would quite like to try to get the museum involved, because they might have some interesting stuff that they could add. But yeah, we'll see.
We'll discuss it then. But yeah, Roger, you are key to this, so don't run away.
Good.
Okay, so big thank you from ARG UK. It's so lovely to see everybody and hear what's going on. I'm feeling really inspired now, and I will be in touch about the others. Thank you. All right then. Go Ghostbustering, Chris.
Thank you. Bye.